Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to Allah Loves. So we've covered prayer, we covered purification. Now we're going to cover the masajid. We're going to cover the mosques. And I know that many of you have heard many hadiths about the importance of the masjid, but again, let's cover it within this context. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Ahabbul biladi." The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Ahabbul biladi ilallah masajiduha," that the most beloved of places to Allah are the masajid, and the most hated of places to Allah are the marketplaces. Now, when we talk about the masjid and the central importance of the masjid to our lives and what this means in terms of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously it's the house of Allah. And he who seeks to make Allah his primary concern, then let everything that is beloved to Allah become beloved to him. And so let the house of Allah become his own house. And that's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Al-masjidu baytu kulli mu'min," that the masjid is the place, is the home of every single believer. So it's the house of Allah and it's the house of every single believer. The Prophet, peace be upon him, forbade those who tried to forbid their wives from going to the masajid. And he used the very powerful rhetoric, "La tamna'u ima Allah masajid Allah." Don't forbid the female servants of Allah from the houses of Allah, just as you, as the male servants of Allah, go to the houses of Allah, because these houses of Allah are meant to become our homes as well. Every single believer, even a child, is meant to find the house of Allah as the primary house in their own lives, the place that they go to for mercy, for tranquility, for nourishment. And there's absolutely no replacing the role of the masjid in one's life. There are other places that you could get together and do halaqas and do gatherings. There are other places that you could get together to socialize. You can pray in other places too. You can form a congregation in your home, but there is no place like the masjid. So let's talk about this for a moment. The masjid is the place of prostration. It's the place of sujood. It's the place of the remembrance of Allah. And that's the obvious reason why it's the most beloved place to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many people remember Allah in the marketplaces? So think about dhikr versus the lack of dhikr. The remembrance of Allah versus the lack of the remembrance of Allah. Now back then there was no concept of nightclubs and bars and things of that sort. So let's just keep it towards that. These were the two most functional places in a person's life. They were between the masjid and the marketplace. And usually when you go to the marketplace, it's very hard to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why there is such reward for dua as-suq, for making the supplication upon entering the marketplace. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamd, yuhyi wa yumeet wa huwa hayyun la yamut, biyadihi al-khayr wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. That there is no God but Allah. He is one and there is no partner with him. He is ever living and never dies. He gives life and he gives death, and he has dominion over all things. The Prophet, peace be upon him, mentioned the great reward of saying this upon entering the marketplace, because it's not easy to remember Allah in the marketplace. In the masjid, you're surrounded by the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you should be. The Prophet, peace be upon him, also extended that idea of places in which Allah is remembered versus places which Allah is not remembered to every other social gathering and thing that we do in our lives. So he said the most blessed of gatherings are the ones in which Allah's name is mentioned, and the worst of them are the ones in which his name is never even mentioned. So bringing Allah into our gatherings, into our spaces beyond the masajid is certainly beloved. But this hadith has a greater dimension that I think is very important, especially in the 21st century, where the masajid, where the mosques are not just places of dhikr. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah commented on this hadith, and he said that one of the other reasons why the masjid is beloved to Allah is because of the type of interaction between people that it fosters. So it's a place where you come to seek mercy, and it's also supposed to be a place of exchanging mercy. And he said that in the marketplaces, you usually see division and argument. You know, people usually haggle and argue and bargain in the marketplace, and they're divided, there's deception, there are false oaths and all types of things. And he said the masjid ideally is supposed to be a place where none of that is present, where it's supposed to be a unifying place, where there's mercy and tranquility and harmony and nourishment. And instead of false oaths, calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of deception, a place of great admission and vulnerability. And so it's not just the space of the masjid and the space of the marketplace. And certainly the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us to engage both ethically. But it's how we turn the masjid into the most beloved masjid to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to the Muslims, to Allah. right? How do we take this masjid and turn it into the Madani community, that Medinan community that the Prophet, peace be upon him, established, where we're not just remembering Allah in the masjid, but that remembrance of Allah is cultivating a certain type of interaction amongst each other in the masajid, and then that same spirit is carried out to the marketplace. It's also telling that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the masjid is not a place for buying and selling. And he said, if you see people doing trade within the masajid, tell them, may your transaction not be blessed. So the masjid is supposed to be a place that's reserved for those things. May Allah fill our lives with its mercy and tranquility, make it of central importance to us, and dedicate us to making the masjid the closest to the masjid of the Prophet, peace be upon him, so that it could be most beloved to him. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.